Welcome to Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnath. I'm Suresh, your guide on this global journey, diving deep into the world of life, love, and money. Please visit my website, sureshbasnath.com, for more information about me, our programming, and connect with our community. Today, we have my friend Barbara Penningroth on the podcast. Barbara, who embodies vibrant living, blending curiosity, deep spirituality, and compassion in all she does. A professor, a skilled nurse, therapist, and author, she has touched countless lives with wisdom and insight. And I hope you enjoy this upcoming conversation. Welcome, Barbara. We're going to just start some breathing, then we'll start the conversation. Deep inhale and exhale. Let's get grounded. Feel and get connected with your heart. Feel your body. And don't think about anything except paying attention to your breath. Slowly, we'll open our eyes. Thank you, Barbara. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to this part 2 of the episode. And in the part 1, we had a lot of insightful and amazing conversation. In part 2, we'll be talking about Barbara's relationship and also mentorship and about her book and many, many other things. So, Barbara, you had amazing journey in relationships and marriages and long-term friendship and companionships. Can you give us some idea how the journey started and uh, what happened along the way?
Sure. Well, first of all, one of the things I would say is all relationships end. And that's one of the things that's important and I think you can use that as a guide. They're going to end by death, leaving, possibly divorce. And just because the relationship didn't end as you wanted it to or as you expected or it didn't work out doesn't mean that it was a mistake. I truly believe that relationships are of all kinds are put in our lives for a purpose and that we learn from no matter what the relationship is like, we learn about ourselves and we learn about other people through those relationships. So I've been married twice, first time 10 years and the second time 25 years. And I had a long-term companion who was the one that we talked about before with his death, who I was with for over 20 years. And then I had a hiking adventure partner for 20 years. So, and this is another point I would say about relationship is that there's almost never is there one person who can satisfy all your needs. In fact, this is the first time in history that we've ever expected a marriage or a single relationship to satisfy all our needs. You know, prior to this time, as much little time as 100 years ago, relationships were contracts for the raising of children or for transmission of property or things like that. And if you liked each other, that was really nice, but it wasn't so essential. Okay, so what I would say is that what's happened in this culture is we expect one relationship to satisfy and evoke everything for us, and it simply can't. And that's why friendships are so important. That's why family is so important. That's why intentional family is so important. It is having a whole variety of relationships in your life which satisfy different parts of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
which evoke different parts of yourself, and in addition to, I would say, a really long-term relationship. That's also important. But friendships are important too.
Mm.
So in this end of the second marriage, I think, Phil and I were together for 25 years, and at the end of that relationship, he was the one who chose to leave, but I also understood it because there was something in the way that we connected that wasn't present, that was really important for his spiritual growth. And so even though I was devastated at the time, and he was too, I can remember sitting at the table up in the dining room in the mountains where our home was, and I can remember sitting there and thinking. I said, we were both in a lot of pain, and I looked at Phil. And I says, Phil, this feels like a death. And I said, and in this culture, there's no way to mark a divorce. Okay, you get divorce papers in the mail. That's the ritual. Every other thing, like marriage and births and christenings and all those kinds of things, there's an actual ritual. Well, not as much as there should be. There should be a becoming adult ritual, and there isn't for the most part. But except getting a car, maybe. But but this is probably one of the most important kinds of transitions that occurs in so many people's lives, and it's just unmarked. And because it's unmarked, because there's no way to recognize this, I mean, what ritual does is it transports you from one way of a life to another. Okay, and without that closure, without that saying this is a transition point, it's very difficult to make that transition clearly and effectively. Okay, so in also in a lot of marriages, when they end, there's a lot of anger, and from my working with this, anger is almost always a cover for grief, because it's much easier to be angry. It's a much more powerful position in the body than to let yourself sink into the grief of the loss. And so what we decided in that moment, I said, what if we did a memorial service for our relationship? And so we looked on the internet. There was nothing about it at that point. This was in 1998, okay, and there was nothing about it, and so we designed our own, and we actually did a pretty good job of it, I think. Now there's millions of references to it. A lot of them came out of that, because so what we did was we designed a ceremony, which I'll tell you about the essential pieces in a minute, but we designed a ceremony, and then we performed it in front of a spiritual group that we belonged to, because we felt they could deal with the fact that this was going to be so different and so emotionally impactful. And out of that came, people said, you should write a book about this. And I said, well, maybe, but not now. I said, give me a year, and maybe I can do it then. Okay. So he and I wrote this book together, and we went on a national book tour. We were on Good Morning America and CBS Evening News and NBC News and so on.
Wow. You're famous all over the U.S.
Yeah, well, I seem to have a talent for ending relationships well. I'm not sure I would have chosen that as a talent. I would have rather say stay in relationships well,
right.
which I also do well too. But I have had a lot of experience with and helping other people also end relationships in a way that has gratitude and respect and dignity, because love doesn't end just because it ended. And it was terribly disappointing. What you had together doesn't. You loved each other at one time, okay, and that's still there. And you're also taking with you who you've become in this relationship. And the way you end relationships has everything to do with future relationships. Okay, if you're ending a relationship with bitterness and hate and so on, that gets carried on, and it poisons and makes future relationships more difficult. So we looked at said, okay, so how are we going to do this in the way that honors what we've brought? And what we discovered there were a couple of different things that I think are essential to a ceremony like this. And we think, after working with couples about this, that probably about half of people could do this with their ex-partners. And the rest of the people, if they couldn't, they can do it with themselves, and that also makes a difference. So whether you do it with yourself or your partner, it's still going to have a profound effect on your ability to go on with your life with gratitude and some sense of this did have meaning, rather than just being in devastation. So the first part was speaking in our ceremony, was evoking, if you will, sacred space. Like, what was our intention in being here? And that we talked about being able to support each other in our soul's journey from this point.
Sure.
Okay. Then we had, and our intention was to be open and honest and transparent and undefended. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started off with a tribute to the relationship, and we did one of those videos that had the whole history of our relationship with all the pictures. In fact, we went through years of pictures and chose to use for this, and had this put together. So this was the history of our relationship. And then we talked a little bit about how we gotten to this point and what we were feeling in this moment here. And then we did a section on letting go of the past. And this is and a lot of this had to do with a lot of the memories of the past, the gratitudes we had for that, who this person had been, what we'd learned from them, and so on. And then letting go of the future. And this probably is the most difficult part of the relationship, because if you don't recognize it in a relationship, you're not only letting go of the relationship, you're also letting go of your dreams for what was going to happen in that relationship. And that's a whole nother level of grief. For a couple of years after we split, whenever I'd see a couple walking down the beach holding hands, I'd burst into tears, because that was not an old couple. That was not going to happen in this relationship. Mm-hmm. And that was part of letting go. And what we did then to symbolize that is we each had those things written down about the things we were letting go of that weren't going to happen. And we put those in a bowl and we burned them. And the idea was that the energy release now was available for us in our individual life journeys, that it was now available. And then we did a section on forgiveness, about forgiving them and for ourselves for anything that we'd done that was intentional or unintentional, that had been hurtful. And then we did an exchange of rings back. The question was, what do you do with the rings? Okay. And so we gave them back to each other. And with a thing, we each said the same thing, but I release you as my husband. I take you as my friend. I receive your ring and will hold it in my keeping as a sign of my love and support for you on your soul's journey. Okay, so I still have that ring. It's sitting right over here behind me. Okay, it's sort of wow. It's a symbol of my support for him in the rest part of his life. And then the thing we forgot was, now what do you do? How do you leave? and so I would add that like we didn't quite know what we were going to do. We both stood at each other and looked like deer in the headlights, because we hadn't figured that part out. But then so we decided that we'd sort of just did it. But I would say plan how you're going to leave that space. And it isn't a ceremony like this is not a cure-all. I mean, you don't just do it and you don't feel any more grief and everything's okay. But what it does is it sets the intention to leave this relationship and go on with your life with a lot of dignity, with a lot of caring, with a lot of gratitude, with a way to work with your feelings from this. And so I recommend it for both couples if they're able, and certainly couples with children. And we even say, if the children are old enough, they need to hear, we will still be your parents. Okay. And we're going to set aside our differences to take care of you, to make sure that you're okay. And so the book has all these suggestions about how you do these various things, because we worked with many couples after that and learned a lot. Like even the timing, we did ours probably too early. I would probably say it's easier to do this ceremony when the divorce is actually complete. We did it at the point of our separation.
Ah, I got
Okay.
it.
But you
Yes.
can't wait too long because
Yeah.
people now are, they've gone on
Yeah.
with their lives and so on. So, but there's a lot of ideas in the book about if you wanted to do something like that, plus a lot of examples of ceremonies that people have done that worked for them. So,
Do you have a book that you can
yeah, I
show
do.
us?
As a matter of fact, I do. So it's
That's
called a Healing Divorce, Transforming the End of Your Relationship with Ritual and Ceremony. And it's by Phil Penningroth and Barbara Penningroth.
Yes.
And it is available on Amazon, but it probably would be listed under Phil rather than my name, even though it's there.
Oh, sure. Thank
Okay,
you.
and
Thank you.
it's also on Kindle.
Oh, great. Oh, that's wow, amazing. And are you still friend or what's?
Oh yeah, we're still friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's remarried, and we're friends, and we talk to each other pretty often. In fact, he just sent me a CD which I still use. He just sent me a CD the other day just because he thought I would enjoy it. It was about
that's so sweet.
Yeah, it was about the Grand Canyon, where I've been a number of times rafting, and he said, "I think you'd enjoy this," So.
Oh, that's so nice. Oh, wow. And yeah, for many people, it's really hard to befriend after separation or divorce. And what really helped you in this sort of life? And because you probably had done a lot of work or reflection and all of that, so that you separated more harmoniously.
Now?
No, that time.
Oh.
What kind of more spiritual journey help you, or what kind of things help you to actually do it?
I think the spiritual journey, and also I think, again, my background as a therapist and so on, and recognizing that what you take from how you move from one relationship into the rest part of your life really makes a huge difference. But I think the essence of, and this is one thing I always listen for in couples, are when I'm working with them and like in counseling, is that both of us had a commitment to the good of the other, as much as our own good. And if a couple is capable, if the people in a couple are capable of holding both of those, their own good and the good of the other at the same time, I think it makes the whole, whatever happens in the relationship, in the marriage, so much more meaningful, so much more possible.
And so even in today's world, even you said 20 years and 25 years of marriage with one person, and today's that seems almost impossible for many people. But what really worked to last relationship for 25 years, or because, and why people cannot continue that path? Do they evolve, or do they become different person, or do they not treat do they treat it the same way as if it was 25 years ago?
I'll tell you a story about that. When Phil and I reached our 10th anniversary, we decided we were going to renew our vows, okay? And we had a venue and everything else. And we were going to write new vows because we felt that the ones we had before didn't reflect us as well. And so we started to write our vows, and about 3 weeks before the ceremony, we're looking at each other and saying, we have drifted incredibly and we didn't even know it. And there's all these areas where we don't meet anymore, and we hadn't even noticed that was true. And I think part of that is you get in a relationship and you begin to take things for granted. And you begin to say, this person is always the same. When you hear yourself saying always, stop, okay? Because what's happened is you're not paying attention to yourself or the other person anymore. You are making the assumption that you know who this person is, and that you've always known who this person is, and that you will always know who this person is. And that is not the case. I mean, each of us changes day by day, and it took us 10 years to notice how much change there were. And we said to each other, should we call this off? And I said, no, let's go ahead. We'll each write our own vows, and then we're going to go back and work on the areas that we're not meeting anymore. And I think another hallmark of our relationship was that we were able to give each other enormous support and freedom to pursue our own dreams, even though they were different than our own. So in other words, I had full support for his writing career and so on, although it wasn't, for me, that wasn't something I was interested in. He supported me in all my adventures. You know, when I wanted to go in the Grand Canyon, I said, Phil, I want to really go in the Grand Canyon, and I'd love to take this trip. And he said, do you want to have a good time? And I said, well, of course. And he said, then don't take me. I can't think anything worse than sleeping in the sand. He said, just go and enjoy yourself. You know, so we had and there was a lot of trust between us too, because the relationship was an honest relationship. There weren't secrets. There weren't things that we withheld. We talked a lot. That's why I'm so amazed we hadn't realized that we drifted so much. But we did talk more after that 10-year, because we realized that we had been taking each other for granted and making the assumption that we knew what was going on with the other person, and that they were still the same, which they weren't. So nobody is. I mean, even in this program that you and I are in, there's these relationship agreements that we make, and I worked with another partner the following week, and we said, well, we don't need to make another one, and we didn't. And then the next day, when we worked together, we both appeared with one, because we realized we did. Even in 3 days, there'd been a difference.
Oh, yes. We're attending every day.
Yeah, every day. And I think that's I mean, even at the end of that ceremony that we did, part of the ceremony was the group we were with, there was a discussion afterwards about what the ceremony had evoked in them. And that's where the idea of the book came. One man, people in the group were aged from 18 to in their mid 80s. And the 18-year-old got up and he said, if my parents could have done this, it would have changed my life.
Oh, wow.
So there was so much bitterness, so much anger.
They were talking about the ceremony and
the ceremony, yeah.
Yeah.
And another man who was next to his wife, he got up and he says, I want to be with you. He turned to her and he said, I want to be with you the rest of my life. And I'm realizing right now I'm taking you for granted. And I'm not going to do that anymore. And another guy got up and he said, you know, I'm not proud of how I ended my relationship. It was 20 years ago. And he flew to Toronto to talk with his wife, and she didn't want to do the ceremony.
Okay.
But he still told her what he wished he'd been able to tell her at the time. And then he did the ceremony himself. And he said that it was so healing and that he was so happy he'd done it, even though it was 20 years later. And then people said, you know, you should write a book. And that's where I went, because I wasn't ready at that point.
I'm thinking now that what would you advise for people so that they can continue growing in the relationship or make it stronger? Because sometimes I heard people are not curious about other partner anymore, or they don't have sort of connection or bonding. So, or it becomes complacent, right?
Yeah.
So how can they improve that? And what's the challenges?
The challenges are beginning to take each other for granted and not making time. I mean, one of the problems, I think, is that there's so many demands on people in their life that the relationship just goes on the back burner. Especially if there's children and you're taking them here and you're taking them there, and you just don't have time. Any relationship takes time. And so building in those times together, keeping in mind, I mean, doing even evaluation. I've worked with some couples where they've decided that at least once a month they're going to sit down together and say, what's working? You know, what's not working for me? Is there anything that we need to change or do differently so that we can stay together and really enjoy each other? And stay loving each other. I think another thing is many couples think they're going to stay in love, right? And which is that real emotional high, rather than what happens when you're in long-term relationships is you get to that place where it's like it's the ocean rather than the wave of the relationship. And it's being able to be in that and really appreciate the companionship, the support, and also figure out how to ignite that fire every once in a while, which really helps too.
Mm-hmm.
Tantra, by the way, good choice.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. So
pay attention. That's what I'd say.
yes. That the key is because many people are busy with their life and the relationship becomes more complacent. How to pay attention to other person so that the relationship continually grows. What should they do? Lean in
Lean in. I mean,
or become more vulnerable because
be
sometimes people don't even talk about things
yeah.
anymore.
Be vulnerable. I mean, I would say that, and be curious, and also realize that relationship is constantly changing, and if you don't keep up with how it's changing, then you don't have the chance to work and adjust to that and learn from that together. Also, in relationships, there'll be times when one person is growing much faster than the other, or so on, and it's really, even if that happens, it's helpful if both partners know why that's happening, and are able to support that and still be present with it. But it takes attention and it takes commitment. It takes the idea that I'm in this relationship for the long haul. This is not and there's not an easy fix here, okay? Except, and it's not easy, attention, focus, keeping curiosity. Who is this person? And looking at also what is here rather than what isn't here. Okay, because so many people, if you find yourself saying this person isn't doing this, they aren't doing that, they aren't doing that, they aren't doing that, now you're over into that edge that is not really helping you anymore. The question is, what is here in this relationship? What can be developed? And sometimes there isn't enough. Then the question is, what do we do with that? But most people come to that place way too early. Way too early. I think there's so much more possible.
We, in our culture, both here in the US and other countries, parents don't sit down and teach them and educate them about relationship or just like in finance, right? I gone through undergraduate and I was majored in finance, then I got my MBA, and they still didn't teach me how to balance my book.
Your
checkbook, right? Nobody talked. Nobody. I got my undergraduate. They only teach us how to balance corporations' balance sheet and books, not personal.
Yeah, well,
right? Nobody teaches about relationship.
Nobody teaches about. I think you're right. The two most important courses probably are finances and relationship.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and nobody teaches.
Nobody teaches that. Now,
how do we learn? How do we learn?
Yeah, there are some schools that are starting to do that, but it's still not seen. It's seen as sort of fluff. It's still not seen as absolutely essential for a successful. But I mean by that is a meaningful, a purposeful a life where you feel glad you're getting up in the morning.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Both of those things are really critical.
Yeah. And because for me, nobody taught me how to be vulnerable with your partner or wife, right? How to lean in, and I thought everything should be sort of perfect, right? But what can you give us some examples of what leaning in means to people, or how to be vulnerable and how that can help in relationship?
Okay, so good question. Okay, so leaning in my words, means that you make a commitment, okay, to this relationship, okay, and that means showing up. It means that it's important to you, that it's important to your life, and you're willing. Another key to this, by the way, is love languages. Okay. If you're not familiar with those are ways that we give and receive love, and they're not the same usually for both people. So, for instance, one person gifts might be really important to them, and the other person doesn't care about those at all. For another person, quality time might be important, and and you got to look at what does that mean. For some people, it means talking together. For others, it means watching a movie together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the question is, in this case, what are the love languages? And being aware that because they're different, that just because you're expressing that, say, if you're expressing it in gifts and gifts don't mean a lot, the other person's not receiving that as love and caring. And they're only going to receive it in a way that's meaningful for them. And being willing to do that because you care about this person, okay? Even if it's different than you. So leaning in, if we go back to that, it's being able to, and then this is where the vulnerability comes in. It's being able to be transparent, to be vulnerable, to be available, and again, people aren't taught that. Okay, if you're available to yourself in the beginning, it helps. That's where meditation practice or something like that does, because you're at least aware of what's happening in you. Okay, and then sharing not only the events that are happening to you. Mm-hmm. Oh, I went to work today and this has happened, but sharing and how I felt in this was this and this and this.
Because either sad or I was happy or
yeah, and why,
why you were happy or sad,
yeah,
right?
Just what it evoked inside. And it takes practice. Again, we're not taught that. Very few people grow up learning how to express their feelings in ways that are really effective. Now, there are a lot of programs that can help you with that, and it's a good idea sort of to seek those out if you're truly interested in that. But it has to do more with being willing to be really present and paying attention and curious. I think that's what I would say in terms of leaning in. And what was the other one you said?
Being vulnerable and being leaning in, right?
Yeah, it's if you're not vulnerable, the relationship's going to stay right here. Okay, by being vulnerable, you have the chance, and this is one of the things that's great about long-term relationships. You have the chance to go really deep in terms of who you are and what you can share and how you can be together. And that doesn't happen if you stay on the surface. Or if you're in multiple relationships, it's harder because all the energy isn't in this place. Okay, and so I would say it's taking the risk, being willing to risk, which is hard. People, and then the other thing is people think, well, if they love me, they should know that. Well, they don't. It may be obvious to you, but it's not obvious to them. So you have to take the risk. And how you say it is really important. You don't say, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're not doing this. You say, what would make me feel really happy inside is if you could do this, I would feel so good. Okay. And that's really different than you're doing it wrong. And also noticing what you're appreciating about the other person. When they make an effort, even if it's not what you would, if it's in the direction that you're looking for, say something. I really appreciate that you came in to say goodbye to me this morning, even that. Or I appreciate that you took out the trash. A clean kitchen really feels good to me. It's like being appreciative, being present, noticing what you want, not what you don't want, and letting the other person know when they're on track, okay? And that you appreciate it and that it feels good to you. And then being with your own feeling, if you're having difficulty with something, it's more like, when this happens, not when you do this or whatever, it's your fault. When this happens, it brings up a feeling of real sadness inside me.
Okay.
And I just want to share with you that that's there.
Which many people have a hard time doing it.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. And people always, in today's world, especially in corporate settings or corporate America or whatever it might be, professional world, we want to be equal and everything. That's great. And because there is always discrimination about gender and all of that, we have a female and male gender. Is there a difference between gender versus feminine essence and masculine essence?
Yes. At least I see it. Okay. We all have what would be called masculine and feminine traits.
Mm.
within us, and we have different mixtures of that. And I'm not talking about I'm not talking about sexual expression. I'm talking about qualities like courage, like which would be normally considered a masculine, but it certainly has to be present in both. Okay, qualities compassion, which would normally be considered feminine, but it needs to be present in both. Okay, and you I think of relationships as complementary often. That it helps because you can't do everything in your life by yourself. Okay, and it helps to have partners who have different skills than you, who have different abilities, and then you can bring those to each other. And if you're really working with each other, you can really teach those to each other too. But they're also part of the gifts that we bring into a relationship. I don't know if this is answering your question exactly,
Yes,
but
yes.
it's all between us. Now, in a relationship, it helps. Again, as I'm talking about, there are certain roles, but those can be, like the man is usually going out earning a living, quote, and the woman is taking care of the house and children, and probably earning a living at the same time nowadays. So, and the husbands may be helping much more in childcare than they did before. So there's a complementariness, but if there's can be this sense of, this is how these things are necessary to help our life run smoothly. How can we help each other so that these things happen, so that we have time to enjoy each other? And it can change in various times. I mean, there's times when I've worked with some couples where the husband is home taking care of the children and the wife is out working because she loves being out working.
Sure. Yes.
And so it's like, what are the gifts that each person is bringing, and how can those be fully developed, and how can they support the relationship?
And when do you feel you're fully in feminine essence or feminine energy versus masculine and other thing? Does certain things a man do to you will make you feel more?
Let me just say that the masculine energy is more outward, facing outward, and the feminine energy is more facing inward. I'm really working with this. I'm still working with this in my life right now because I carry a lot more masculine energy in the sense that I'm a doer. I'm like out in the world and I'm accomplishing all these things. And now I'm working on being in that place that's much more relaxed, that's being in that place that's much more expansive, than being in that place that's much softer and open. And having more of that capacity, not meaning that I'm going to be in that all the time. Feminine does not mean weak.
Yes.
And it does not mean passive. Okay?
Right. Yes.
And the masculine and feminine energies support each other. And they actually sort of activate each other. Okay. And they also activate internally. If you're balanced way on one side or way on the other, you're probably in distortion in some way. And you're not, in a sense, getting the full benefit of what could be within yourself.
Oh, wow.
Like for instance, a capacity to stand firm or to stand for a principle, for instance, may be seen as a masculine principle. It can also become aggression, or violence, which is a distortion of that principle. Okay, probably because there's not enough feminine characteristics inside that can soften that or modify that. But we all have that in each of us. And it's sort of still a mystery for me. It's one of the big things that I'm working with still. Because I think I'm taking a program right now, and I had a really distorted vision about what masculinity or femininity was, and I learned a lot from this is a 90-day relationship experiment program, by the way, which is a really great program. But one of the exercises that one of the partners that I worked with in the program was, well, let's see if we can explore this. So we went back and forth to say, okay, I would say, Suresh, what do you have on masculinity? And you just say whatever popped into your head, and I'd say thank you. Then you'd say to me, Barbara, what do you have about masculinity? And I would give you that answer. And we'd do that until we sort of ran out, but we would hear each other in terms of what we're saying, and that begins to help sort. Okay? And then we do the same with the feminine. And then like, Suresh, what do you have about feminine? about the feminine, and you'd give me whatever popped into your head, okay, and I would say thank you, and you don't talk about it, just go back and forth. And I felt there was this sort of seismic shift that happened in me, and I still don't understand it in my head, but something that was said moved something inside to a place of understanding I hadn't had before, but I can't conceptualize it yet. It's just in my body differently. And I don't know. Anyway, this is one of my edges. Being more present in every moment, okay, paying much better attention, and this thing about how do you explore and balance the masculine and feminine energies within you. And for me, it's developing more of that state of relaxation, more of a state of being, and rather than doing. So.
Wonderful. That's great, Barbara. It's a great conversation about relationships and love, and how to start good relationship, how to see good plans for a good relationship, and also if it's not working, how to end gracefully in a ceremony so that the relationship continues as friendship and is still talking today, right? And receiving gifts. So,
which is low in my love language, but I appreciate it. Because I appreciate it because it was really thoughtful. In other words, what he knew me well enough to know that this I would find this beautiful, what he said.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind, we'll conclude with what's your top love languages you have?
Mine?
Yeah.
Okay. Probably right on the top together are physical touch and words of appreciation. And then quality time, just a little bit tiny under that. Okay. And then the acts of service, which is doing things for people. Yeah. And then gifts. Gifts are really the least important to me. Now, I like them, don't get me wrong. But without the physical touch, without those other things, they are not as important.
Absolutely. That's a great
and
place
you?
to...
What about you?
Mine? Oh, great question. I'm still figuring those things out.
I'll ask you later.
But I'll say that quality time is very, very important to me. Point of service and word of affirmations. And all of them. I didn't know that word of affirmation was that important until I took the quiz. Then I started thinking about it. Actually, that seems to be very, very important to me. So I'm still just testing and experimenting and see what it feels right for my body, right? And for my mind too. So it looks like it's kind of a journey.
It is. And I think it may be able to change throughout your life too. I'm not sure about that, but I think it might. Yeah.
Might. Okay. But depending on the sort of age or environment and culture, probably it might change, right?
Yeah.
So, wow. We learned so much from you, Barbara, today. It's a continued conversation. Also, we'll have probably a new episode conversation with Barbara because we haven't talked a lot of things we wanted to talk today.
I would love that. Thank you. And thank you for being the guest today. I really have enjoyed talking about this with you, Suresh.
And we're going to close with a quick meditation, if you don't mind. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let's send some loving kindness to the world and to the people, to all beings, animals, planet. Think about sending love to somebody you know and kindness, and send them those loving and kind thoughts. And also think about you receiving love and kindness from those people too. We'll go out, we'll have good intention for people, that will lead to good thoughts, that will lead to good actions, and that will lead to good karma, and hopefully happier and peaceful and joyful days and life ahead. Thank you for joining our program. See you next time.
Here are some takeaways from our conversation with Barbara today. Number 1, exploring different spiritual paths can lead to profound experiences and personal growth. Number 2, following one's calling may require making difficult decisions and letting go of attachments. Number 3, being open to the guidance of the divine can lead to unexpected opportunities and experiences. Number 4, living in the present moment and follow your calling. Number 5, don't wait to pursue your dreams and passion. Number 6, be curious, and be open to new experiences. Number 7, live life fully and without regrets. So thank you for tuning in to Finding Meaning with Suresh Basnath. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did. If you enjoy our program, please support to sustain us by subscribing on YouTube or follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcast so you never miss an episode. If you have any feedback, if you have any questions that we should tackle in our next episode or in the future episode, please let us know what questions you have, or just say hello. Please visit our website sureshbasnath.com or in the social media. Until then, thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.